Hello and welcome to the 200th episode of the Metapod podcast. Definitely 200th. Don't think of it anything else. It is the 200th episode. Sean, we are past the World Championships. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I watched a lot of Worlds over the weekend. I tried to theory craft a deck that people maybe saw on stream on Saturday, and I tried to bring a version of that to the challenge on Sunday, and I got my butt whooped. I will say
Ooh.
I was building a deck that revolved around the new Petrant and Poison, and my first two opponents of the challenge were playing Ancient Box and Roaring Moon, which plays the Ancient Booster Capsule, which, if you don't know, is horrific for a poison themed deck because they can't be affected by special conditions. So, like, my whole deck didn't work in my first two rounds, which was unfortunate. But fun deck. Maybe I'll drop the list in the comments or in the Metapod Decks channel on Discord so people can theory craft on their own.
If you want to eventually build Sean's Pecharunt EX deck on Pokemon Live and play around with it, see how it goes, things like that. Pokemon did have a code for the alternate art Pecharunt EX, that basic 190 HP dark type Pokemon. All you have to do is in the redeem section, right? The same place where you put your codes. You need to type Outburst Worlds 24. That's Outburst Worlds 24. We'll get you a special illustration rare Pecharunt EX in the game. Only one. I don't think that there's anything on here that says only X amount of copies given out. I know in the past a lot of these have said they've had limits on it, and I don't think they ever hit those limits because there's so many.
Yeah.
But
I will say, get your Petrants now. Pecharunt stonks up because of some news that we're also going to talk about today. In my opinion, Pecharunt stonks up. I think dark decks are going to be popular for a while, Jake.
The code is redeemable until August 26th at around 23:59 UTC. So whatever time that is for you, but just do it before August 26th, as what Sean recommends. Do it right now if you haven't already. But anyways, there was more news that released around the World Championships. We'll go into what the standings were of the World Championships and things like that at the end of the episode. Let's get a couple of these news pieces out of the way first. But first, we are going to talk about Pokemon Pocket, Pokemon TCG Pocket. We've talked about that on this podcast before. The announcement was made at the closing ceremony that it will release on October 30th. Sean, have you seen videos and stuff circulating around Pokemon Pocket's demo that was at Worlds?
Yeah. I know that a lot of the creators that were invited out to Worlds made their own little reels and shorts and other things like that. So I saw a little bit of that on the giant touchscreens. Granted, you will not have a giant touchscreen yourself when you play the game. It will be on your phone. So,
well, I don't know.
I mean, maybe. I
getting
guess.
my new phone recently, it's a giant touchscreen.
I guess you could just hook up your phone to a giant screen and turn it vertical. But no, I did see some of those videos. I also saw the promotional video that they released as well. So how about you, Jake? Did you get a look?
I saw it, and I'm really curious. You can register for it in the App Store and Google Play Store if you have iPhone or Android. I thought it was kind of neat. I mean, we saw people in those reels and videos, they opened packs, right? And then looked at some of the cards, very unique designs. I saw a Sabrina card, Sabrina full art. Trainer card, supporter card that I wish was a real card. And I hope that Pokemon TCG Pocket is a testing ground for whether or not they should release certain arts of cards, because man, there were some really pretty cards in there. I saw a good amount of cards that were in there, and some unique cards that aren't in the Pokemon trading card game. And it looked really, really cool. I didn't see any of the speed games, though, as you would call it. Yeah, their version of fast games.
Yeah, they have like slightly different rule set to the typical Pokemon TCG. I don't think there's any energy involved.
I think there is, but
Oh, is there?
it's like an energy zone or something. Again,
Okay.
I didn't see any gameplay, so I
No.
didn't see any games itself, so I could be completely wrong about that. But it is very different, as you were saying.
Yeah. So I mean, look, it'll be interesting. I think it's one of those things where it may be for I don't know if it's for me, but I could see somebody like even myself downloading it and like if you get a certain number of packs every single day, I don't know if there's going to be microtransactions in the app. I don't
Hmm.
believe so there are at first at least. So you'll just get a certain amount of packs every single day and it'll just kind of be kind of fun to open them. They have a whole range of cards and art though from I think the very beginning of the TCG all the way to stuff like Jake was alluding to that doesn't even exist yet in physical card form. So I think Ken Sugimori was at Worlds, I believe. The person who
Um,
illustrated the original Pikachu.
Mitsuda Arita.
Oh, Arita, yes. So
Hmm.
Arita was at Worlds, and he opened one of the packs, and one of the cards that he flipped over was his original art of Pikachu from the base set. So I did see a video of him doing that and being very excited about that. So, you know, I think there's like a lot of opportunity to experience a whole range of art and cards from Pokemon's history, which is kind of fun.
Hmm. I mean, I even saw it was an old illustration contest Gardevoir that was shown. It was like a Gardevoir like looking into a sunset. It's one of my
Hmm.
favorites in terms of an art that's like made of a Pokemon card or illustration, and um, it was shown in there. So I was like, oh man, they're even doing some good like callbacks too.
Yeah. So, and then there's like this one feature at the end of the promo video where like you can, I guess, tap to hold or interact with very special cards, and then you can sort of
Oh
go
yeah.
into the frame. And it's sort of at the end of that video, it alluded to like maybe there's some additional interactivity or gameplay element maybe with those cards. But it's
Hmm.
kind of hard to ascertain exactly what that is in the promo. So we'll just have to wait until October 30th to see what all that's about.
Again, you can do your pre-order right now if you want to get it as it comes out. But for those of us that are looking for physical cards, right, in the future to get excited about owner Pokemon returning to the TCG and Team Rockets had teased at World. So I think I misspoke in the Discord. I said Team Rockets return. I think it was a little bit ahead of myself when I posted all those pictures. But as expected in 2025, we are going to see the owner's Pokemon come back into the Pokemon TCG, something that we talked about previously on this podcast, sort of in the Gym Hero style, that could potentially come back. You know, we even saw a preview of that with like the Lance's Charizard V. I think it was a V Pokemon. That was a promo for one of the 25th anniversary set. That's what it was.
Yep.
They're officially called Trainers Pokemon now, and several different cards were revealed in here, and several different cards that people got really excited about. Right, we saw regular arts, we saw a special illustration rare looking kind of card, and even regular cards too, EXs and not. But I think the one that made the most noise, Sean, in here is Ends Zorark EX. Sean, we have English translations for all these cards, and I again posted them in the official Metapod Discord server. If you want to go in the link or the show notes below and join the server and see these for yourself, or you could probably just go online. It's probably pretty easy to find online. But Sean, what is Zorark EX? And
Boy,
Zorark
howdy.
EX.
Ends Zoroark EX should just be called Towards Zoroark EX.
Towards Zorark
Like, let's
EX.
be frank here, because this is the triumphant return of Zoroark EX with trade. So if you don't remember,
Hmm.
Zoroark GX had an ability called trade. You discard a card, you draw two. This one has the exact same ability on a two prize stage one dark Pokemon. But Jake, they said that they saw this one and they also looked at Mew VMAX and you're like, people like that card. and we made some really broken deck with that card. What if we just put Zoroark GX's ability and Mew VMAX's attack onto a card? And so the attack for 2 Dark Energy, Night Joker, choose one of your benched ends Pokemon's attacks and use it as this attack.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the one thing I'll say off the bat here, I think it's interesting that they didn't give it a second attack. I know that they've tried to like make it so there's not two ability and 2 attacks, and that in order to do this attack, have this attack do anything, you need to have a Pokemon on the bench that matches this. So weirdly enough, if you for whatever reason have a dead hand, this is the only card in play, it actually does nothing, which is kind of interesting. But the cool thing about it is because you're naming ends Pokemon, you see right next to it an ends Reshiram in this promotional image. So you can copy a dragon Pokemon's attack. You can copy who knows what else we're going to get from N. I mean, I guess if you want to know what Pokemon we're probably going to get, you could probably just look at who N's Pokemon are in the video game, right?
Darmanitan is one of them. I know for N. What are some of the other ones? Sigilif is one. Sigilif would be cool. It's been a while since we've had a Sigilif card that was impactful. Many people may remember GX Sigilif, or I think there was a baby Sigilif that did some damage in the meta for a little bit. But
yeah, so
Reshiram.
Yeah, obviously we got Reshiram, but yeah, Jake, how are you feeling about this Zoro rebrand?
I think this is really cool. I think honestly with the Zoroark, I think they're going to really like. I think the attack kind of checks itself, right? I know that with Righteous Beating, right, for 2 energies, 20 times the number of total bench Pokemon on the field. Right, the numbers could get really wonky, especially with double colorless energy in the format with the old Zoroark. But now with the new Zoroark, you not only have to make sure that it's benched Pokemon, but also it has to be ends Pokemon. And we don't have an idea of how many Pokemon in the set are going to be X Trainers Pokemon, right? I can't remember, and I wish I had Gym Heroes TCG expansion. You can hear me typing exactly what I'm going to be saying right there. I didn't think about this until right now, but I believe in Gym Heroes, the old set way back in the early, was it 2000s or did this come out in the 90s?
No, Gym Heroes might have been 2000 or 2001, I want to say.
August 2000 it came out in English, but my point is every single Pokemon card was Trainers X, right? There was no just regular Pikachu in there. It was always like Lieutenant Surge's Magnemite or Blaine's Growlithe or Misty's Goldeen. So we don't actually know if this set is going to be similar in that aspect where every single Pokemon has a trainer. We don't know how many different trainers there are. We only know of 2 of them right now, with a teaser of several other ones. Like I think Arvin was teased with the Mabostiff, his dog in the games, if you've played that. Psyduck, which I assume is probably like Misty or something, which could be cool. And then the gold and silver trainer, the main character in there, teased with a Pichu. So many possibilities that you can do. And then with after that teasing Team Rocket in reference to the glory of Team Rocket, has a Mewtwo flash through the logo. So maybe that set kind of building off of it in like in Rockets, Mewtwo, things like that. But anyways, there's still a lot of information that we don't know about this. But I think going back to my original point that I was talking about, and Zoroark, its effect of N's bench Pokemon kind of nerfs itself already. I don't know if it's overly broken. It has the potential to be broken, but I think this shows that they're being super mindful of these copy attacks, right? Especially, with Mew VMAX winning worlds, with Mewtwo and Mew VMAX winning worlds, with Regidrago, which we'll talk about later, had a really strong showing at the World Championships this year. All these copy Pokemon doing incredibly well. So maybe trying to check that a little bit a step further by giving it almost two conditions, one of them being almost an extremely limited condition. So unfortunately, I don't think this Zoroark will be as good as Zoroark GX because Zoroark GX was paired with so many different Pokemon, but this is much more limited. But again, time will have to see. But I do think it's very, very exciting. I do think it's a really cool callback to an era that a lot of people love. And I think it's a really good direction. If they were going to tease any card, that was the card to tease.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, look, trade is just we have it on Curlia basically right now. Like
Mhm.
we've had it on Chinchinos in the past. Like it's just such a good effect where, especially Jake, we have in the new set, which we'll get to at another episode. We have a stadium that will allow you to expand your bench if you have a Terra type Pokemon. So
Yes.
there's a world in which you maybe play this card not necessarily even for the attack, but because it is an amazing draw engine. And if you're playing Dark Energy, you can maybe throw in one or two of the ends attackers, but it's really just your draw engine. I could very easily see this being a hyper turbo deck. You maybe play a Terra Pokemon, play that stadium, play Hyper Aroma, get a bunch of these out. And then when you don't need them anymore when they become a liability, swap out the stadium, discard a few of them off the field if they have any damage. So, this is way so far in the future, who knows? But
I want to bring up one more request to the Pokemon Company.
oh yes.
I would well, I don't even know if this is a request because I don't know how far this would go, but I would love if every trainer basically like has a Pokeball that they
That'd be
are
cool.
kind of known by. I can't remember what ends is. Maybe it's just a regular Pokeball, but I would love if there was like I think it'd be really interesting if there was some sort of tool card like a Pokeball that you could attach to a Pokemon and it would give a Pokemon that trainer's like ownership, right? Like
Oh.
if I attach a Moonball to my Gyarados, right? A regular Gyarados,
Mm.
because that would kind of synergize well with some of the older cards that are going to be in format that are not trainers Pokemon.
Mm.
Um, so I think that would be cool because it kind of goes with the theme of like, oh, caught, it's
Yeah.
their Pokemon, and so could make Zoroark EX insane though.
I mean, yeah.
Being able to copy like Terapagos with that stadium that you were talking about and do
Yeah.
righteous beating again, insane.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting to see where they go with it. I want to point out one other Pokemon that was teased because I think it's extremely relevant. Um,
Hmm.
Lily's Clefairy EX.
Oh
So
yeah.
this one, I love this card. It's a basic. You don't, which is nice because I think this is going to make. I think this makes Gardevoir potentially, maybe even Zatu decks. I think this makes them very good
If
because
they're still around.
if they're still, I think they will be though because Lily's Clefairy EX, it has a different weakness typing than Gardevoir. It's metal type
Hmm.
weakness, so it's not dark. And this Lily's Clefairy says the weakness of each of your opponent's dragon Pokemon is now psychic. So we got rid of fairy. We reintroduced dragon types with no weakness. And the Pokemon Company is going, okay, well, let's give them a weakness again. And now they're weak to what fairy became, which is psychic. And the cool thing is, this Pokemon is not just a bench setter. This attack is really good. They basically have come out with a Raichu or an Entei or a Suicune, but for psychic. Full Moon
Hmm.
Rondo, 20 more damage for each bench Pokemon with a base attack of 20. And like we said, with that new Stadium Terra combination, I think this card gets out of hand real quick. And giving Dragon Pokemon weakness is chef's kiss.
Yeah, it's pretty nice to have another option as a big heavy slammer in some instances with the Clefairy. It is 190 HP, so it is a little bit on the lower end.
True.
But as kind of a support minded Pokemon, right? This isn't uncommon to what we would see.
Yeah.
This said, we don't know exactly when it releases. We just know it's 2025, I think, for right
Well,
now.
I
So
think we could do a guess, Jake. Do you want to look up what when EUIC is next year?
Oh, is it supposed to like align with EUIC?
They have been doing things typically. So the Paradise Dragona set, whatever that one is 2 weeks before LAIC. They moved EUIC up
Hmm.
earlier this next year, which I believe would then correspond with the release of this. So 2 weeks before EUIC is going to be my guess.
International Championships schedule European International Championships February 21st through the 23rd.
So I would go out on a limb and say February 7th is going to be our release date. Our official release
Okay.
date, which means pre-releases will be 2 weeks before that. So the end of
In
January is when
January.
pre-releases. That's
All
I'm
right.
really going out on a limb there, Jake, but I think that that's probably the right timing.
I will hold you to that, and we will make fun of you on this podcast if you are wrong. Just like we were wrong,
So wrong.
honestly, on the World Championship meta. Sean, do you want to? Let's
Yeah.
start off with talking about the day one meta first, just to give people an idea of what was popular.
Yeah.
Reggie Drago V Star, I think we did guess this, was the number one most popular deck. I think we said that Reggie Drago would be the most popular deck in the room, but
Yeah.
it was almost staggering of how popular it was. 24%. I don't have the information on me. I don't know when the last time a deck at Worlds took up 25% of the room, especially on day one. But just about everybody picking this deck. Then Charizard being the second most popular deck at 12.8%. Archeops Lugia V-Star being the third at 12.65%, and then a big drop off into Gardevoir at 9.6 and Raging Bolt at 9.3, with 63 people at a whopping 5.5% playing Iron Thorns EX.
Yeah. I think that this spread is pretty in line with maybe what we were thinking about going in. I
Oh, I
don't
don't
have
think it
our
was for me.
I mean, I don't have our tier list up, but we put Gardevoir in the S tier, but we put I think Reggie Drago in the A tier, Lugia and Raging Bolt were I think pretty high up. I can't remember where we
Hmm.
stuck Charizard. Maybe that was B
I
tier for
think
us,
Charizard was also pretty high up.
but like
It
I
was
feel like
either in A or B.
I feel like all of these decks, save Iron Thorns, was in like pretty high up in our rankings. And the the other deck that I think was high up in our rankings that didn't make these lists, which is not a surprise, was Snorlax Stall.
Hmm.
But what we saw from the online tournaments was that the more people play Lugia, the fewer people are likely to succeed or want to play Stall. And I think it broadly panned out that way in this tournament. Lugia being not only more popular, but I think broadly more successful than Snorlax Stall.
Hmm.
Um, Probably because of some of these changes. But that's the day one. Then the question
The
becomes day
the day two
two.
meta didn't really change, I feel like. I think it mostly just stayed the same. Reggie Drago V Star, 27% of the room. So taking up a little bit more. Lugia jumping up to number two at 13.3. Charizard 11.8. Raging Bolt, same amount. Iron Thorn 7.8, hurdling the Gardevoir at that fifth place spot of
Yeah.
7.0.
Yeah, the Gardevoir I think was the biggest shocker in my mind in terms of
Mm-hmm.
like I thought it was top tier. And it's still a good deck. 7% of decks in day two being Gardevoir is not nothing, but it is a huge tumble from the day one meta share. So that was a little. I think that's a surprise for us.
I think the just the matchup with Reggie Drago is so difficult for
Mm-hmm.
Gardevoir. You know, you have a turbo fast deck like Reggie Drago that's able to do the spread right of not only Phantom Dive but also the
Kyurem.
the Curum. What is that attack called? I have it right in front of me. Trifrost.
Yeah.
Uh, Trifrost. You know, being able to wipe out so many different Pokemon is just it's crazy how oppressive that deck can be on Gardevoir, and I think Gardevoir just really suffered because of it.
Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right. Like if the Gardevoir player doesn't get fully set up, doesn't find the Manaphy, especially, Or if
Hmm.
the Reggie player is able to just, ping down that Manaphy one turn and then Kirim them the next, it's brutal, man. So I think Reggie Drago, in terms of the overall numbers, I would argue was the most popular and probably the best deck at a broad level at the tournament, I would
Hmm.
say. But Jake, just because you are the most played deck, just because you have the best conversion rate, doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna win it all.
No, because Reggie Drago did not get first, second, or third place at all in this tournament. Now, Reggie Drago did take up 4 of the top 8 spots, but they were kind of the lower half in
Mhm.
a sense. Sean, what do you want to talk about first? This was, well, let's mention the whole top 8, right? We said 4 Reggie Dragos in there. There was 1 Raging Bolt Ogre Pawn. There was 1 Miraidon in
Yeah.
there, surprising to many. Roaring Moon, second
Yeah.
place, also very surprising because we'll talk about that Roaring Moon list. It's not the one maybe that you're thinking of. And then Iron Thorns winning the whole thing. Fernando Cifuentes, congratulations from Chile. Uh, Excellent job with that deck. It ended up winning Worlds.
Yeah, it was I did not have that on my bingo card. I don't think anybody had Iron Thorns v Roaring Moon on their bingo card.
Nope. If you
Bruh,
did, you're a liar.
I have been saying, I've been giving Iron Thorns the business for a while now. I don't like the deck. I don't think the deck is that great, but clearly I don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm just
Well,
gonna
here's
say
the
that.
thing. I think so. Let's open up the deck list. Let's talk about the deck list a little bit because some people might not know um, Iron Thorns EX as a deck. So this deck essentially is a disruption deck. It really maximizes on you not being prepared for it, right? Iron Thorns EX with the ability initialization. As long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, Pokemon with a rule box in play, both you and your opponents, have no abilities except for future Pokemon, right? So if you remember from, let's just say, the day 2 meta, right? Think about these rule box Pokemon that have abilities. Sean, if you pull up the day 2 graphic, you can see so many of the abilities just right here on this graphic. Reggie Drago V Star, right? Not going to be able to use its ability. Ogerpon, not going to be able to use its ability. Lugia V
Yeah.
Star, not going to be able to. Charizard EX, Pidgeot EX, Gardevoir EX. So
It's true.
Iron Thorns really taking hold of this meta with this ability because you're only playing 4 of them, right? There's only 4 Pokemon on this list, and it's 4 Iron Thorns. You're always going to be able to start it, always going to be able to get that disruption, and going to force your opponent to say, okay, here's what I'm going to, or you have to answer to this right now, or else I'm just going to run home with it. And then from there, you're looking to pretty much like attach energies just about every single turn, use stuff like boss's orders or prime catcher to be able to knock out specific Pokemon, right? That could disrupt that method for you. Some really interesting cards in here.
Yeah, I mean, what we saw, and some of the most interesting things is you do have Turbo Energize, which turn one, the
Hmm.
reason we play Arvin at the highest count is you want to turn one, if you go second, Arvin for that Turbo Energize, get 1 energy on board, and then power up your benched one because you're going to be doing typically 140 every turn with the future booster energy capsule, adding 20 to negate double turbo. And then you have to move an energy to the back. So you're kind of like always trying to manage how much energy is on each and switching back and forth. And then some of the other cards that I think really shine in a deck like this are Colress's Tenacity. So
That's
new
a big one.
card. Yeah, new card from Shrouded Fable, good one. Lets you search for a stadium and an energy, so you can go get your double turbo and your Lost City, which is really
Hmm.
annoying for some decks.
I think
Um,
double turbo is the big deal about this card though. Like having a searchable option
yep.
for double turbo is insane.
And then I think you have crushing hammers in the deck as well, so really disrupting your opponent's energy if you flip heads. If you don't flip heads, then kind of useless. But you gotta. That's just the nature of this deck. And then I will also point out the one of Giovanni's Charisma. If you are not familiar with what this card does, I don't blame you. What it does is you get to put an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon into their hand. That's the first requirement. But if you do that, you then get to attach an energy from your hand to your active. So, say you have an energy in your hand. Say you've got lightning and a double colorless in your hand, and you're going second, and you want to attack the first turn. Well, with Giovanni's Charisma, you can do that and disrupt your opponent in the process. So, really, I think interesting list here overall. Also plays a one of Penny to pick up any damaged Iron Thorns late in the game.
And I think we even saw it used in the finals in one of the games, the Penny. Yeah.
So the thing that this deck suffers from the most, I would argue, is if for whatever reason you judge yourself or Iono yourself into an awkward hand, because the deck has effectively no draw power outside of the supporters. So there are worlds and windows in which I think that this deck maybe bricks a little bit. Or, Jake, did you see how many mulligans Fernando gave up in the finals during one of the games?
I don't remember exactly because I was out and about kind of watching it. 8 of them.
8.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me when you're playing 4 Pokemon only in a deck.
Yeah. And you sent me a stat. This is apparently the fewest Pokemon in a World Championship winning deck ever, beating the previous record of 7. This one just having 4 Pokemon. So, yeah, I don't know. This one feels a lot like, in some ways, the old Gardevoir and Sylveon deck from the tag team era, playing just a 4 of one Pokemon typically.
I would agree with that. It's the first time in a while that we've had kind of like a good 4 Pokemon deck. But I think the main reason for that is because these abilities and effects are super tricky.
Yeah.
Right. Like you were saying, like the draw power necessarily isn't super strong in these decks. They really hold tight to their resources and try to just do one single game plan. And so you only need a couple of these Iron Thorns in field. I was kind of surprised that this deck didn't run Legacy Energy as the A spec. Yeah, I would have thought that like with Iron Thorns, being a 2 prize Pokemon, having the A spec Legacy Energy can make things really awkward for some of your Pokemon, especially like Iron Hands. You're worried about Lugia and Iron Hands. Could be something to look out for. I don't know.
I will say, I know I saw a list earlier in the tournament that was running Legacy Energy. So I think that it does come, I think, a bit down to personal preference. Maybe the Prime Catcher in this one is a little more disruptive. But, I think if Legacy Energy is your bag, then I think that's also not particularly incorrect. If any of you out there listening are looking to play this deck.
Hey, I mean, Iron Thorns, I actually, before the Masters Finals, I posted this in the Metapod Discord server. I bought my playset of Iron Thorns EX before the Masters Finals. And wouldn't you know it, less than 24 hours later, the price of it has doubled. And then also, there's a current buyout on TCG Player for Iron Thorns EX. So, not going to say that I know what I'm talking about, but...
But you know what you're talking about sometimes.
Yeah, I know how to save money,
Yeah, a blind squirrel finds a nut eventually, right? Even a blind squirrel.
Yeah, I mean, I do have glasses. But anyways, this deck, really cool in the sense that it forces the format to slow down. One of my big problems with this format in general, we'll talk about some of the decks in it, is that it felt super turbo and aggressive. And so seeing a deck like this kind of force everything else to slow down in comparison to Gardevoir, which just is a slow deck, it doesn't force your opponent to be slow, was really interesting to see excel in this championship. So congratulations again to Fernando, the 2024 Pokemon World Champion for Masters.
Indeed. And Yeah, we have in second place. Speaking of Turbo, though, going into the second place Roaring Moon EX deck, I think another one that was just not really on our radar in terms of being a top tier deck. Um, but I believe the player, I will try to pronounce the name correctly. Let me see. Let me go back here. Shinosuke Shiokawa from Japan playing Roaring Moon EX here. I have the deck list pulled up. So it is a Roaring Moon EX focus deck. So you're really focused around the two prizers here with Roaring Moon EX. You do have one copy of the baby Roaring Moon, of the single prizer Roaring Moon, just to, I think, make the prize trade a little bit awkward or maybe be a.
It's also a good attacker at some
Yeah.
point,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
It's a very good attacker, especially if you're playing, if your opponent sends something up or is playing a deck that is also a single prize deck. I think you can sort of send this one up there to trade on a one-for-one basis. But in terms of some of the new cards, playing a 2 of Petulant EX, which is excellent, making sure that your Roaring Moons are never trapped in the active, so long as your opponent isn't playing Iron Thorns, at least, which we saw was a problem in the finals match.
Yeah.
Also, we're playing Pheasantipity EX, another great new card from Shrouded Fable. And I will also say, don't sleep on Petulant EX as an attacker in this deck. Late in the game, you can, for 2 Dark Energy, it does 60 damage times the number of prize cards your opponent has taken. So if they've taken 4 prizes and you need to knock something out that is 230 or 240 HP, like Iron Thorns, like Iron Hands, a few different Pokemon out there, you can throw up a Petulant instead of having to use the Roaring Moon attack that does damage to itself to knock it out.
It's really interesting to see this deck, especially, when we think of like these dark decks and we think about like Roaring Moon and stuff like that, we think about its ability to capitalize on weakness with like Gardevoir. So seeing this Frenzy Gouging Calamity Storm crazy guy over here just running the table with being able to swipe knockouts on all these kinds of different Pokemon was just really cool, especially when you talk about Turbo Dark, in general as a state of a deck, right?
Yeah.
People love Turbo Dark decks over the years, and this is kind of the next iteration of it. Running a couple cool cards with the Pheasantipity, like you said, I think this probably utilized Shrouded Fable the most, having the Petrons in there, and then Night Stretcher, just a really good card for a lot of these decks. We'll see it a lot.
Yeah. Night Stretcher doing very well. And yeah, it's just like you said, though, this deck is very fast, right? Like this deck probably chooses to go second in most instances. And then the third place list, which I think was a bit of a fan favorite going into top 8. Jesse Parker, I believe Jesse is the co-host of the Tag Team podcast, if I'm remembering correctly.
No,
No, it's JW and
Riley.
Riley, but I think they're friends.
So
they're all
yes,
friends.
yeah. So Jesse is part of the Tricky Gym Ohio kind of group. Is part of the Full Grip Games team. Excellent player. Won the regional earlier in the season with Miraidon, and so came back at this World Championships and made top 4 at Worlds with Miraidon. Excellent, crazy to see in here. Kind of an interesting twist in Miraidon, not too much different, I feel like, but with 2 Squawkabilly EX and 2 Iron Hands, there's the game plan right there that you always want to maximize on. You always want to be able to Squawkabilly in the first turn, basically, if your hand is not perfect, I will say. And then also with Iron Hands, always want to be able to aim you very much whenever you needed to. So those are pretty much the new cards in here outside of the Pheasantipity as well. Pheasantipity, as we mentioned, continues to make an impact on this top 8 and also just World Championships in general in here. So
Blood Moon
but everything else is
good in the deck.
Well, yeah. I mean, late game attacker then, can only cost like 1 energy at the end of the game, 240 just for one attachment can be really nice because we see in a couple different situations with Miraidon, right? Those electric generators, the main reason you accelerate your deck looking at the top 5 cards, finding up to two basic lightning energies and attaching them. Sometimes you just whiff them, man, even in a deck that has a whopping 16 basic lightning energies and two double turbos. So
Yeah, that's a lot.
it's just a great I mean, that and Raikou just being great options in general for attacking in this deck. And then having a couple little tech cards in here like the Iron Bundle, the Zapdos, love those little guys, and Potown Store to be able to find your 4 Sealstone, Bravery Charm, and Rescue board. Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think I will say some of the interesting things about if this is Jesse's list, and it's correct, a couple of cards that you maybe don't see in this list that were talked about as very popular for this deck, Academy at Night or Academy
Hmm.
something, yeah. So that's the stadium that lets you put a card from your hand on top of your deck. I know that's a card that people were talking about for Miraidon, which partners really well with Electric Generator, guaranteeing you at least one energy off of your Electric Generator. So a little surprising not to see that in this list. And then I will also say, surprising in this list, no Pokemon recovery at all. No Super Rod, no Night Stretcher. So, once that Pokemon is gone, it is gone. So very, very much a deck that wants to go fast, take prizes, and never look back. So,
Well, I think the reasoning for this is like a lot of these Pokemon here. One, you want to bench, right? Like you use Miraidon, you're benching Iron Hands and Raikou, or
mhm.
like Raikou and Zapdos, right? The Blood Moon Ursa Luna can be really great late game. The Lumineon, has a lot of different options, especially good synergy with Forest Sealstone alongside that Raikou as a V Pokemon, Pheasantipity, good. So it's like, I feel like and especially playing one research, right? You only have 3 cards in this deck, 2 Squawk Ability and 1 Professor's Research, where you dump your hand,
Mhm.
right?
True.
And dump your resources. So there's actually like not a ton of opportunity that we see in a lot of other decks to where you do have to dump your resources. So that's why I'm okay with like no recovery in here, because it's just like another card you need to find to get basic lightning energies back in your deck when you can just add more basic lightning energies for your electric generators, like cut a step
Yeah.
almost. Because I think more often than not, if you had hypothetically like super rods in this list in Miraidon, I think probably, and this is my guess, what Jesse and the other testing and everybody else in his testing group found was that he was just super rotting basic energies back in, right? So
Yeah.
if you're just super rotting basic energies back in, might as well just switch it for basic energies.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And that's a very good point about like the only two cards that are discarding your hand are Research and Squawk, and
Hmm.
you can only use one Squawk in a game. So, it's really 2 instances in a game max that you're going to be doing that. So that's totally fair. Um, but that's the top three. Jesse was undefeated going into top eight, and really, really amazing run there. But
I think Jesse was he hit some mark. I wish I had this in front of me. I forgot to send this to you, but he had some big milestone because people don't go undefeated at Worlds often.
mm,
Um, and I think he's like one of, I think the last player to go undefeated in Swiss at the World Championships was like 2010.
oh my
I'm trying to
gosh.
see if I can find it. So I don't know if that number is correct, but one thing that you can assess from that is that it is not a feat that happens often. So again, congratulations to Jesse for just an insane run.
Yeah, it was an amazing run. I think it's a deck that, even people in our comments, I think, or in our comments of one of our last YouTube videos, asking to
Hmm.
hear about Miraidon, knowing that it was probably better than people were giving it credit for. So we did talk about it last week. We did mention some of the changes. So clearly performing very, very well at Worlds. Um, and then I think the last deck I want to just take a look at is that top deck, that Reggie Drago deck. We can look at Roz's deck if you'd like.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, just seeing what Reggie Drago, all of the pieces. I don't think it's all that different, but the top decks here pretty straightforward. Running the 4 Teal Mask Ogre Pawn. I think sometimes people run just 3 and maybe opt
Yeah, I
for an
think.
extra card here or there.
Yeah, I think Isaiah Bradner, who was also in top 8, only ran 3 Teal Mask Ogre Pawns.
Yeah, I mean, look, fourth place and fifth place. At that point, fourth and fifth at Worlds, you're basically equally successful. So, it'll be interesting for people to see like what version do they prefer. The attackers, though, it's really Dragapult, Giratina V-Star, Hisui and Gudra, and people continuing to opt for the Kyurem. I know people were kind of on the fence. We're like, does it matter? Does it not? But so those are sort of the 4 attackers that people are leaning on most often.
Hmm.
And then really the new stuff, you got Night Stretcher. Interesting seeing some of the lists. Like this list here runs the free retreating Cleffa to draw you some
Hmm.
more cards.
I think Clef
Because
so good in this deck.
oh yeah, absolutely great. I mean, look, this deck is never really attacking in any meaningful way on turn 1. Like in theory, you could attack with Teal Mask Ogre Pawn, but you're not doing that.
Hmm.
You're not going to do that. So really, turn 1 going second, you want to draw some cards. And then if we take a look at Isaiah's list to see maybe what's the difference, yeah, just running the 3 Ogre Pawn and opting for Radiant Charizard and 1 copy of Halucha to sort of fix
Hmm.
some math with Dragapult's attack.
Also running a Pokestop in there. The both lists that we're showing, both ran Temple of Sinnoh, being very mindful of Lugia, Legacy Energy,
Mist
all the
Energy.
special mist energies, all the energies that are special in this format. And then Isaiah just getting a little bit more aggressive with that Pokestop as well, because you have so many impactful item cards, right? 4 Ultra Ball, 4 Nest Ball, 4 Earthen Vessel, 4 Energy Switch, 2 Super Rods, the Prime Catcher, right? Your ace spec of choice, which I think is pretty much all Reggie Drago decks. Switch card and canceling cologne. That one of canceling cologne that we see a lot for maybe some stall tactics or some iron thorns, if you will.
The only other dragon type Pokemon that I have heard talk about, I know Zach was running it, and we maybe mentioned
Hmm.
it last episode, but there is a new Haxorus that you could also use, which has 2 attacks. One of them just insta knocks out anything that has special energy attached, which is, again, useful against Lugia. But the second attack does 230 damage, which, every now and again, a Reggie Drago deck can face pretty awkward matchup. I think Iron Thorns is a good example of that. So if Iron Thorns sees a huge rise in popularity, I could see Reggie Drago decks opting to include a copy of Haxorus in order to just knock out those Iron Thorns without any, damage counter placement shenanigans.
I will say Zach Lesage, although not in the top 8, did also very well in the tournament. I know was shown on the Winnin, the final round was on the Winnin stream against Rahul Reddy before the asymmetrical top cut. So made it pretty far in the tournament and did well with that Haxorus. So if you're looking for different tech cards, as Sean was saying, that might be a tech card that you look to include in your deck. But yeah, I mean, I think the Reggie Drago was pretty much something that we expected to see in terms of what the build looked like exactly. I know a lot of people, although I will say that for us at least, Roaring Moon was a surprise to see in this World Championship and do so well. I do know, I think it was Celios Network posted that a lot of testing groups and stuff and people talked about actually building a deck like this, and he showed his deck, which is pretty similar. There are a couple differences in there, but there was a lot of people that if they just had more testing or um expected a little bit differently, a lot of people would have played this deck. So interesting. Then I saw a lot of people kind of think about this, but shout out to our Japanese players, Sunosuke Shiokawa, being able to pilot this as well. I think that's a
Yep.
cool little thing.
In terms of some of the other decks, I just want to point out 43rd place Ryan Antonucci with Snorlax Stall.
Hmm.
And then if you're wondering where the heck Lost Box went, I think a lot of people are feeling that. 53rd, Marcos Cifuentes. I have
Hmm.
no idea if they're related, but Marcos Cifuentes.
I think they are related.
Okay, so
Yeah.
with the world's champion playing Lost
Hmm.
Box at 53rd, so it's there. It's certainly was not as popular. The fact that you have to go down that far and you have to go even further to find the second one or the third one of some of those. I do think that Kiram and Reggie Drago's popularity has definitely done a number on Lost Box decks. I think Lost Box
Hmm.
stonks are at an all-time low now, which I'm sure people
I
are happy about.
I will be the first to admit that I was definitely wrong about the Curum. I think Curum, just in its presence, was super dominating. But I think kind of Pheasantipity stole the show at the
Yeah,
World Championships. I think Pheasantipity kind of put a lot of these decks kind of over the edge with the ability to draw three, much more impactful than I think the Oricorio GX, its predecessor,
yeah.
with that draw three after Pokemon's been knocked out ability. But I would highly encourage, if you want, look at limitlesstcg.com. That's where you can get a lot of these deck lists and a lot of information just over the years of Pokemon. There's some really, really cool decks like the Kawasaki brothers playing Goldango, both making top 50. Very, very cool deck. There's even a stream match on it, right? Lucas Zing won or 16 and rounded out the top 16 with Chin Pao. Like a lot of cool decks in here, which is very nice. But the for in my opinion, the format is real weird.
Yeah, it's very fast, and we'll talk about this in the next episode when we do our Stellar Crown review. I don't think it gets any slower necessarily.
No, probably not.
So it's interesting. I think it is interesting to see the giant swings that different sets seem to make of like, when Gardevoir EX and Charizard were the most popular things in the format, it was very much a you want to go first because you want to set up, and we were praising, it's a setup deck era. You need to set up, you want to evolve, you want your rare candies, all that stuff. And it just seems like the pendulum has swung completely back to now you want to go second because you have ways to turbo out attackers on turn one with Roaring Moon, with Miraidon.
Hmm.
So it's with Raging Bolt EX. So definitely a little whiplashy in terms of the state of the game. But the last thing I'll say about Worlds format is I think that a lot of ways this is by design. I watched a few games, especially day one, when the time limits were not quite as long as day two or top eight, where you just have, say, 50 minutes, I believe. I saw a couple of matches, one of which had Miraidon in it against not a single prize deck. I can't remember what the other one was, but two prize based decks, and they went to time. And I'm like, how do you go to time with Miraidon? So, even these fast paced decks, I think, seem to sometimes struggle with finishing a best of three. So I think Pokemon is, just really frustrated with the fact that, like, single prize decks, people really want them to be good, but the more that they are good, the more untenable it becomes for a best of three format.
I think a lot of it has to do with the amount of actions that you have to take
Yeah.
in a single turn, right? Because coming from playing other card games like One Piece, where you're severely limited on what you can do in a turn in comparison to Pokemon, right? There's no cards in One Piece that are like search your deck for this, or
Yeah.
at least playable meta cards. There's only one card that I can think of that's meta in One Piece that is saying shuffle your deck. Just
Yeah.
one. And it's
Interesting.
played maybe as like a two of
Hmm.
in a specific, very specific deck. So it's super it's super interesting coming from those other games where like games finish much faster. Usually there are definitely some slower decks and some slower matchups and stuff like that. But yeah, I think finishing a best of three right now is unreasonable in Pokemon. And I think you need to be aiming almost as if it's a best of one and win your best of one. So then
Yeah.
you more than likely win the three.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely strange. We'll see. I know that the Western world, prefers a best of three format for
Hmm.
regionals for larger events. I understand why, right? Like, because you don't want it to come down to you have a couple of bad games, but it may eventually, depending on the size of these tournaments, Jake, and the way that the formats go, we may eventually get to a point where we have to go best of one for day one of these tournaments to finish them appropriately. To you know,
Like the China Masters
yeah,
Championship that we covered. Yeah, wasn't that best of
yeah.
one
It's best.
for day
Japan is
one?
also a best of one format for their large tournaments.
Hmm.
So we may do we may switch over to a mix one day, but that's that's just my thought, my last thought there. um, but Jake, there was one more piece of news announced.
Hmm.
Can you give us the down low? What is it?
It was like shocking, but not really shocking when you sat there and thought about it based on the news in the last couple months. We have the world's locations, and we'll talk about more about the world's, but we have the world's locations for the next 2 years, right? If you don't remember the leak a couple months ago that happened, San Francisco is going to be housed the location for the 2026 World Championships. But before that, in 2025, we're going to go to Anaheim. Anaheim, California is going to be the location. So, California for 2 straight years, but also like pretty near each other. California, right? Both on that like southern
Yeah.
edge in a sense.
Well,
So,
people in San Francisco may disagree with how close they are, but it's definitely
e-
closer than any two worlds together back to back have been before, I think.
well, not totally. It's not
Maybe not.
something that happens often, but Anaheim San Francisco was a world championship back-to-back combo in
Oh,
2016 and 17, and
interesting.
then
Okay.
2005 and 2006 was San Diego Anaheim. So Pokemon Company really loves California.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I mean, I will say, being in Anaheim, I think there's going to be probably no official things to do with Disney World, but Disney World, Disneyland, I should say,
Hmm.
is in Anaheim. But there may also be, I wonder if there's going to be any crossover next year of, I wonder if there's any construction of a Pokemon theme at Universal, at the Universal in LA, because I could
Hmm.
I could very easily see there being some interesting things going on at the Universal Studios in LA next year, which they are the ones that have the rights to Pokemon IP at a theme park.
I was gonna say I don't know if Disney wants to do
No,
stuff with Pokemon, but
no, it'd be
if you're
Universal.
saying, yeah, yeah, yeah. So who knows? There's a lot of possibilities over there. But not only do we have the locations, we already have the world's dates for both of the next 2 years in Anaheim 2025. Mark your calendars right now. Write this down wherever you write down your notes and whatnot. Anaheim World Championships going to be August 15th through the 17th. And then San Francisco going to be August 20th through the or 28th, I'm sorry, through the 30th in 2026. So nobody can complain for the next 2 years that we don't have world states because we do.
That's very true. Yeah, no, I like that they're giving us the dates. And I think because of the new structure of Worlds being that top 125 and then a little bit lower for other regions, my guess is that these choices were all made because they can actually expand the number of spectator badges because
Mm-hmm.
of that. You have far fewer players that are going to be competing. But the venues, from what I've heard, the Anaheim and San Francisco venues, the Anaheim at least, it's a very, very large venue. So depending on how much space they've rented, I could easily see these two being a little bit larger in terms of spectator badges. So, you know, I think fingers crossed, a lot of people, especially in the US and North America, probably are going to be very excited to travel. It'll be cheaper to go, cheaper to stay. Yeah, than like Hawaii or Japan, where or
I'll be
London
able to go.
was. So
Probably, hopefully.
I will say I did see some people on the announcement, like they were very upset about it being in the US for these years, but it's it's
I
been in the US most years that Worlds have been held,
mhm.
but prior to this year, it was in Tokyo and then in London the year before, and then we skipped 2 whole years. So it's, you know,
Or Yokohama. It was in
oh, sorry,
Yokohama.
Yokohama. Yes, it's outside of
Yeah.
Tokyo, um, but yeah, like all of this is to say, like, I understand some of the frustration, but it almost always has been in the U.S. because that is where TPCI is headquartered, is out of,
Mhm.
out of Seattle. So I think that has a lot to do with it. It's easier to maybe run some of these events with all of the events coordinating things that they do. So that's my 2 cents on that one.
M- My 2 cents is I know some people were curious as to why like Latin America or some other prominent regions haven't gotten to Worlds yet, right? Because we saw Europe, we saw Japan, Hawaii is part of the US.
Yep.
So it is a US world. So a lot of people were kind of like the next 2 years in the US and not like another country or another region, you know, that hasn't had one yet. So I'm excited because they are both going to be pretty near me and
You could
pretty
drive.
accessible to me. Yeah, I can drive to it. Anaheim, I'm pretty sure I'd be able to go to because it's before classes start for most colleges, but San Francisco might be a little tight. I usually have
That
teams
looks like
competing
the
by then.
yeah, that looks like Labor Day, just before Labor Day weekend or something like that. So
Yeah, which is also really surprising that San Francisco dates are so late in August 28th through the 30th, because that's going to affect a lot of, I think, like juniors and seniors
yeah.
and even college masters.
Yeah, I mean, it will be interesting because that usually, like, that late in August is almost always the weekend of Labor Day. Now, I haven't looked at the
Hmm.
calendar. Maybe Labor Day will come a little later this year. Maybe it'll be like a September 6th type Labor Day
Hmm.
weekend. But yeah, it is a little late. You're absolutely right. It's a little late for that window. But we shall see. But Jake, that is all the news that's fit to print, so to speak.
There was a lot. And remember, Limitless dot or what is it? Limitless TCG.
Yeah.
LimitlessTCG.com. Go to the tournaments tab and click the World Championships to get a bunch of these decks, because you can start playing these decks too at your locals, right? This is legal for the format currently right now. So go ahead, start playing those. Let us know what decks you're liking the most, whether that's on live or in person, and we'll talk to you next week. Some exciting stuff happening in the coming weeks for the Metapod. So we'll talk to you then.